We're into hurricane season, and this is a great time to visit again with the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center, Jamie Rhome. And Jamie, as we head into this hurricane season, one of the questions that everybody would want to know some information about are any new tools we'll use this year, or are we just refining the ones we already have?
It's both. I mean, every year we fine tune the tools and capabilities that we have at the center to make sure that we're continuing this march towards better and more accurate forecasts, but we're also launching new initiatives like the one behind me here, which will be a brand new, first time ever at the Hurricane Center, a dedicated rip current risk map. And for people who are saying, why rip currents at the National Hurricane Center, it turns out that rip currents are one of the leading causes of deaths in hurricanes. And so we want to take this opportunity to try to highlight that risk for people.
Hey, Jamie, every hurricane season, we always tell people don't focus on the category of the storm. What the category is and the actual areas outside the path certainly differ, and everybody needs to pay attention to all the impacts.
Yeah, rip currents are a classic example of the limitations of the cone. The cone tells you nothing about the rip current risk, tells you nothing about the rainfall risk, tells you nothing about storm surge risk, tells you nothing about tornado risk. And your user experience or your threats or your dangers in your community are going to be entirely based off the presence of those hazards. So one of the things we continue to try to do is slowly shift people off of the cone and Saffir-Simpson scale and instead get them to use these newer products, which, to be quite honest with you, tell you so much more than the cone.
Hey, something else we want to talk about is the surge. That has impacted us here in Eastern Carolina and in other places as well. Again, the Saffir-Simpson scale has to do with the winds, and that is certainly one of the elements that helps drive the storm surge. How should people look at both the scale and what to expect from storm surge?
Yeah, if you look at trends in mortality, which is something we do religiously here, mortality, direct deaths from wind have been declining over the last several decades owing to advances in warnings and communication. So people don't die at the hand of wind as much as they die from the other hazards. And it really is about water. I mean, if you look at a mortality, the vast majority of deaths from hurricanes are from water, most of which inland flooding. And then after that, rip currents, and then after that, storm surge. But if you put all of that together, more than 3 out of 4 fatalities are come at the hand of water.
I think part of the things that we need to keep in mind here, number one is the scale, number two is the path. Helene is a great example of how you shouldn't become married to either.
Yeah, and there are several of these nuances that came together for Helene. First and foremost, as the storm was moving inland, it was descending in the Saffir-Simpson scale, downgraded, if you will, which gives people the false impression that the risk is lowering. The risk was actually increasing owing to the interaction of that tropical moisture with the mountains of North Carolina. The risk was skyrocketing, but because people rely on the Saffir-Simpson scale, which shows the number falling as the wind comes down, it wrongly gives the impression of a declining risk. The other thing, too, is there's too much focus on where the center of circulation, the exact center of circulation is going to track. But you saw this in Western North Carolina. Some of the heaviest impacts and the greatest loss of life were well removed from the center. And again, it's because when the rain and all that tropical moisture interacts with the mountains, where the center tracks is almost unimportant.
I think one of the things that we see in hurricane season is how people prepare. Jamie, what are some things that can mentally help people be ready for a storm?
A lot of people forget a communication plan or strategy in the preparedness kit or getting ready for hurricane season. So cell phones are going to go down after a hurricane, and they might go down for days. How are you going to communicate with your family and loved ones and friends to let them know you're safe? And more importantly, if you have an emergency, how are you going to reach out for help? You're not going to call 911 because there's going to be no phone lines. So think about these types of nuances, because these, while they seem trivial at this point in time, in an emergency, in an actual emergency, when you need help, if you don't have the ability to communicate, that's going to greatly increase the risk to the individual.
Let's talk a minute about these preseason predictions. That actually has some impacts on people in a negative way, while it might help others. How do you think this really helps prepare or hinders people's preparation for storms?
You know, the presence of those forecasts, if it increases people's awareness that hurricane season is near, that's great. And I embrace it wholeheartedly. But if people are trying to extract more information about their personal risk from those seasonal forecasts, then it's a bridge too far, and people need to take a step back. Those forecasts, including the ones issued by NOAA, don't tell you anything about your personal risk. They don't tell you if a storm's going to hit your community or if you're going to get 40 inches of rain. They only tell you the aggregate of the number of storms over the basin at large, if you will, or the entire Atlantic. And again, if that helps you to know that June 1 is coming and to motivate you into getting ready for hurricane season, then it's great. But that's about as much as you can extract from it.
As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you're kind of the specialist on surge. We saw a lot of that from Florence. What are some of the takeaways that you think people need to understand when preparing for high storm surge?
Yeah, so Florence is a classic case of how the storm's size, or how big it is, or how wide it is across, is in many cases, especially in eastern North Carolina, as important or more important than intensity. And that really catches people off guard. The storm size in some parts of the country is more important than intensity when it comes to storm surge. Florence had weakened substantially by the time it reached North Carolina, but had grown in size. And that's what created the larger than life storm surge that many people experienced. And that caught a lot of people off guard.
Jamie Rhome, the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center, thanks so much for taking time with us. And of course, we hope it's a quiet season, but if things get to hopping, we know you'll be providing information and keeping us up to date.